back to the channel. Thank you all so much for tuning in today, as always. And today we're going to be going through my medical school application results. Basically, all the acceptances I got, all the rejections I got, any wait lists I got, as well as where I'm deciding to go to school and why I decided to go there. For those of you who don't know or who are new to the channel, my name is Lily. I'm a former barista who does a lot of coffee content on TikTok and YouTube. For those who are also coffee enthusiasts, I'll put my little coffee recipe that I'm drinking here down below. But I decided to make this video because I just got done with the medical school application process. I was extremely fortunate enough to get some acceptances this cycle, and I thought this video would be helpful for those embarking on their own medical school application journey because, to be frank, you don't always need the best stats or the most amount of hours or the most amount of publications in order to get very favorable results in your cycle. A lot of it has to do with the quality of experience and the quality of reflection that you put in your application. So with that being said, the number of hours I'm going to be sharing with you in terms of the experiences that I put on my primary application, or just my general stats like my GPA and MCAT, again, are just another set of data points. They might look like yours, they might not, and it's important to keep in mind that the stats and the number of hours, so to speak, don't necessarily define you as an applicant. I think it's important to put in perspective the distance traveled by an applicant as well as the quality of reflection and experiences that they had. So I encourage you to keep that in mind as we go through this video. With that out of the way, let's get into the stats that were on my primary application, the number of hours that I spent in certain categories, and the schools that I applied to. Now, on my verified AMCAS application, it listed two different GPAs, the first one being my cumulative GPA at the end of my undergraduate career, which is a 3.91. And then, of course, they calculate your science GPA, and that was a 3.84 at the end of my college career as well. Additionally, I took the MCAT twice, once in January 2022 and the next time January 2023, a year later. My first attempt was a 507 and then my second attempt was a 515, both of which showed up on my AMCAS. Getting into the work and activity section of the AMCAS and the number of hours I dedicated to certain types of experiences, I had 1,570 research-related hours. And in terms of research-related tangible accomplishments, I had 7 abstracts at that time listed on my application and 3 publications. I also had 714 volunteer hours, and this was split pretty half and half with clinical patient contact experience volunteering and non-clinical related volunteering. Additionally, I had 247 leadership, teaching, tutoring hours. If we had to be nitpicky, it would be about 200 dedicated to executive board leadership, honor society related things in college, and then TAing in college as well. I also had 450 paid clinical hours that dealt with patient contact, 159 shadowing hours, and then I also listed a hobby, which was 200 hours. So with all that out there, let's talk about how those stats and those experiences ended up impacting the schools that I ended up submitting my primary to. In total, I ended up submitting my primary application to 39 schools. I've met people that do more, I've met people to do less. I really think it just depends on the bandwidth that you have in an application cycle. If you have the funds, if you have the bandwidth in terms of time and your schedule, why not apply to more schools? It just simply depends on you and what your resources are at that time. The 39 schools I applied to, and of course I'll put them up on the screen, but to name them off on my AMCAS application as they're shown: Albert Einstein, Boston University, Case Western. I ended up applying to their CCLM or their Cleveland Clinic Learners program as well as their MD program, Florida Atlantic University, Chicago Medical School at Rosalind Franklin, Columbia, Donald and Barbara Zucker School of Medicine at Hofstra Northwell, Drexel, Emory, their combined MD-MPH program. I also applied to the MD-MPH program at Drexel because I thought maybe I wanted to do an MPH program throughout my medical school career. I also applied to Florida International, Florida State, George Washington, Georgetown, Harvard, Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, Johns Hopkins, Temple, Mayo Clinic, NYU Grossman, Ohio State, Sidney Kimmel, Stanford, Tufts, their MD-MPH program as well, Tulane, their combined MD-MPH program, USF Health Morsani, UCLA, I applied to their Prime LA track as well as their Urban Health Equity track, University of Central Florida, University of Chicago, University of Colorado, University of Florida, University of Miami, their MD-MPH program as well, University of Pittsburgh, Virginia Commonwealth, Wake Forest, Washington University in St. Louis, Weill Cornell, and Yale School of Medicine. Now, I know what you're thinking, that's only 37 schools. I promise I can count, okay? I ended up, this was a copy of my first submitted primary medical school application. After talking with my PI about the schools that I had on my list, she actually recommended that I apply to UCSF as well as University of Pennsylvania. So I did end up adding those two schools after submitting my primary application a week later. Now, with looking at the schools on this list, you'll notice there's a lot of Florida schools, and that's because I did my K through 12 education there. I did my college there. A lot of my work and activities experiences are based in Florida and serving Florida populations. So I decided, because those are kind of like my state schools, despite moving to Maryland a couple years ago for my post-bac program, I thought it would be in my best interest to apply to as many Florida schools as I felt I fit the mission for. Additionally, because a lot of my service hours dealt with disadvantaged populations, whether it be working in free clinics, doing foster child advocacy, working in federally qualified health centers, that it would really benefit me and my mission to apply to schools that emphasize urban underserved populations and emphasize health equity research, etc., as well as schools that maybe had a little bit more of a research emphasis, because a lot of my projects not only dealt with health disparities in research, but also I had a lot of research experience. So even if my MCAT median or GPA was, I guess, a little bit lower than some of the medians of these reach schools that fit my mission, I did decide to apply, and I'm so glad I did, because I don't think I would be going to the school that I committed to if I didn't. So with my primary medical school application submitted, I started to get secondaries, and it was a whole lot of secondaries, okay? And if you're in that groove right now, please get a spreadsheet. I will link any spreadsheet I use to like keep myself organized throughout the cycle below. I'll include like my template. I kind of edited it based on a previous template I saw on one of the pre-med forums, and I edited it to make it work for me. You can use the one I generally use, or I'll paste the original one that I based it off of in the description below. So use that as you will. But out of the 39 schools I applied to on my primary, I ended up getting all 39 back. And I know what you're thinking, Lily, why would you do that to yourself? Do you hate yourself? And the answer is yes. It was a whirlwind. I definitely had to keep track of all of them and keep very good track of them on my spreadsheet. And I got them done within the month. Fortunately, I did a lot of pre-writing beforehand. Again, because I submitted my primary application so early, I was very fortunate to have that extra time to start pre-writing my secondaries. But that's basically what I spent the couple of months from June 1st to August 1st doing. And I was extremely fortunate, because I was getting those secondaries out so early, that I got my first interview in July, guys. And I was so shocked, because I really didn't, first of all, I didn't think that they even sent interview invites until like later on in the cycle. I was very unfamiliar with how this process worked, to be fair. So I was just trying to be on top of it and get things out so that I could be complete and not have to worry about it anymore. But my first interview invite was actually July 11th, and that was from Sidney Kimmel Medical College. And I distinctly remember like jumping up and down and like crying and telling TJ when I finally got the interview invite. And oh my gosh, like I feel like crying now. It was just such an emotional moment. And I know this is going to happen to so many of you who's watching this video. It's going to be such a wonderful moment when you start getting your interviews back. And I know you're going to get plenty of them, but it just, it made it feel like all the hard work I had spent for the past 7 years preparing for this cycle and preparing for this journey is so worth it. And I then started to get other interview invites, which completely shocked me. I started to get interview invites from University of Pittsburgh on July 17th and University of Chicago on August 1st. So I ended up getting those three, and I was very happy with them. And I was especially shocked at the University of Chicago interview, because I really didn't think I was, again, all that competitive considering my MCAT score. So I was completely over the moon and excited. And U Chicago ended up actually being my first interview towards the end of August. So I was then in grind preparation mode for all of these interviews to come. I did start interviewing at those schools, but I also received a number of other interview invitations between August and early October, before the AAMC traffic rules allowed schools to let students know of admissions decisions on a rolling basis. I did receive interview invites at 24 other schools, a couple of which I did not take, and I'll list the schools that I received interview invites on the screen. Now, the couple interviews that I didn't end up going forward with were Drexel and USF Morsani, really just for the reason of they came later in the cycle. I had already received acceptances from schools that I was very excited about, and although I was really excited about these schools initially, just due to mission fit, due to some of the scholarship offers that I had already received from some of my acceptances, as well as proximity to support, I just felt like at the end of the day, I would have picked those schools over others. Again, no other reason than just personal ones, but I'm sure if I went forward with those interviews, they would have been great schools as well. Now, with all of these wonderful interview experiences, Come October 16th, I was the biggest ball of nerves, and that is the day that schools were allowed to let you know, at least those on rolling decision deadlines were allowed to let some of their early interviewees know about their acceptance decision. And when I tell you I was the biggest ball of nerves, sweating bullets, could not concentrate at work. I was like, man, is everything that I did enough? Like, I was looking back at my secondaries, some of which I even had typos in them. I was like, what if I just wasn't enough when I interviewed, or I went about answering these things in my secondary or my interview unprofessionally? Maybe I'm just not cut out for this. Like, I just kept thinking these things. I was basically what Sammy, my cat, is going through just internally. He's going through his zoomies right now. That was racing through my mind, basically. And finally, I got my notification from Case Western that I had been accepted at like 11 a.m. that day. And I was just like, I literally started crying. And I remember TJ being like, you know, like, this is it. And I was like, I'm going somewhere next year. Like, I never in a million years thought that this was going to be me. Like, it felt like I had spent the last couple of years deciding whether I wanted to apply to medical school that year or whether I didn't. I withheld applying for a couple of years just because I wanted to retake my MCAT, because I wanted to get more experience that I was proud of and could submit an application I was proud of. And it was just so relieving when I found out my hard work paid off. And so that was my very first acceptance from Case Western. And actually that day I received a few other acceptances as well, mainly from Florida schools that I had interviewed at. I received my acceptance from University of Central Florida, Florida International University, Florida Atlantic University, Virginia Commonwealth, and Wake Forest. And then later that week, I received acceptances from Georgetown, as well as a week after Sydney Kimmel. So a very eventful October, and I was just so over the moon excited that I was going to go somewhere next year, much like we all are when we finally get our acceptances. Now, even with this initial list of acceptances, I realized that I was quickly going to have to start rescinding some of my offers, just because when given the choice, an option of certain medical schools versus others, deep down inside, you do know that there's some schools that fit your mission a little bit more based on, you know, the curriculum on the website and what you learned in the interviews. Obviously, some fit your learning style just a little bit better. Some have different rotation opportunities that you're a little bit more excited about. Some are closer to your proximity and support. And some even gave me scholarship offers within the first month of receiving my acceptance. And so with that being said, I had to really evaluate which schools would I pick over others and start rescinding them, just because other deserving candidates were waiting in line for that spot. And there's no way I could take up a spot for each and every one of these classes until the very end of the cycle. That simply would have not been fair to other applicants that worked equally as hard as I did, if not more. And so I slowly decided to rescind my acceptances before the holidays. I did receive other acceptances before Christmas, which I'll list up on the screen, and then started to rescind out of those as well, comparing them according to the offers that I got, again, based on the factors that I said before. And then I received just a handful of others after the holiday season. The first decision that I got back after the holiday, towards the end of January, was actually Stanford University, and that came back from a waitlist decision. Unfortunately, I was very crushed about that decision, but at the end of the day, evaluating how I learn best, I don't think the curriculum would have fit that the best in comparison to the other schools that I received offers from. So I understand why that decision was made, especially with how small the class is, and given my level of experience and my passions for certain areas of medicine. I felt like the students that were accepted ultimately and decided to matriculate to Stanford had different societal missions than me, which isn't bad whatsoever. It just depends on personal preference, and I'm very happy with the school that I ended up committing at. But in the moment, I was very crushed. Looking back on the cycle, I believe I also received my decision from Albert Einstein either in early January or early February. I'll clarify up on the screen. But I was ultimately accepted there. I was super duper excited for it because I really enjoyed the mission of the school. I had a great faculty interview there, and I felt like the populations I would be serving was really right on my alley. So I was really excited to evaluate them as a possible school that I could attend later on. Additionally, I did receive my last batch of acceptances from February through March. The last three I heard back from was UCSF, which I was super, super excited about getting accepted to. When I got my acceptance to UCSF, I literally was crying in the middle of Walmart. Like, I was at Walmart when I got the email, and I cried. And you know your life is turned a certain way when you're crying in the middle of Walmart, okay? But that was my time, I guess. And it was just such a surreal moment. Unfortunately, I was waitlisted at their Prime US program, which really ended up making me evaluate the level of which I wanted to go to the school. So I had to evaluate that later in the cycle, but I was very, very fortunate and to get accepted to UCSF, which again was one of my top contenders toward the end of the cycle. Additionally, I heard back from University of Pittsburgh, and they were kind of like the underdog for this cycle. I interviewed with them like late August, and of course didn't hear back from them until like February, and so it did take a while for me to hear back from them. And I was kind of going to these University of Pittsburgh like sessions where they talk about the school so you can learn a little bit more about it. And the more I started going to these sessions, the more I really enjoyed the curriculum and really enjoyed the students. So they were kind of the underdog that like really appeared to be like in my top like 5 towards the end of the cycle. So definitely was excited to hear back from them very favorably. And then my last acceptance was actually to Cornell, and they were definitely one of the more fun accepted student weekends. And I started to go to these accepted student weekends, at least at some of these schools, and it was just such a good time. And I was really excited about getting my acceptance to Cornell because the mission fit, the free clinics that they have there was just great, and all the students there, as well as at other schools that I visited throughout the admitted student weekend little block that they had in like late February or March through April. So ambitious, same thing with all the other students, but it was just so nice to hear and see the different diversity and perspectives of all the possible colleagues that I'll have in the future. So it was so nice, and I'm so grateful to have gotten such amazing acceptances from all these schools. Now, by mid to late March, I was very, very conflicted because the FAFSA was out very late this year, or at least processed very late this year. And so financial aid packages were kind of on a stall, basically until April. And so I knew I was going to have to start narrowing down even further, especially with AAMC deadlines coming up. And so ultimately, I ended up narrowing down 23 acceptances to a total of 7 over the course of the application cycle. Again, not all at once, but that was through due diligence of research, attending some of the accepted student weekends or going to like certain tours, etc. So that by early April, I had these 7 schools on my list. And those 7 schools were UCSF, Cornell, WashU, Case Western, University of Pittsburgh, UCLA, and Wake Forest. All of these schools were on my list before financial aid offers came out for various different reasons. UCSF, I really not only enjoyed like my interview experience with them, I've enjoyed all of the students that I was able to chat with throughout the cycle. I really enjoyed their emphasis on urban underserved populations and being able to serve them. I also really liked how highly ranked they were in both primary care and research. All those rankings are very arbitrary a lot of the time. I did want to give myself the best opportunity to pursue my passion and choice of specialty, especially in a new place like San Francisco, which I had never been before and never lived on the West Coast. But with that, that would also mean I was farther away from my support system. So I was very, very conflicted with how I wanted to go about choosing schools just on that angle. I really enjoyed Cornell for very similar reasons as UCSF, with the added benefit of being closer to my partner and closer to some of my family in New York and DC. The only con that I felt about Cornell was that I really don't think the learning style and the testing schedule was going to be fit for me. That was just the feeling that I got at the accepted student weekend, but they did have a debt-free program that I was very interested in seeing how that panned out financial aid-wise for me, so I decided to keep them on my list, especially because I really enjoyed the other students I met at the accepted student weekend and really enjoyed the faculty and the area. I liked WashU for very similar reasons, except I did really like the testing schedule, much like UCSF, but it was not too far from my partner. I really enjoyed the St. Louis area, which I didn't expect when I went to go visit them during one of their Discovery Day weekends. And they also gave me a full tuition scholarship back in February that made the decision to attend a little bit more financially feasible than some of the other schools I was looking at that point. As for Case, I really liked them throughout the medical school application process. I really liked the way they test. I really liked their testing schedule. I thought it fit really well with my learning style. I also really liked their concentration system, conversations with faculty, and I really liked the Cleveland area as well. Maybe not as much as some of the other schools that I visited, but I really enjoyed Case as a school and could see myself going there. Same thing with Pittsburgh. I did feel like it was a little bit of a college town, but other than that, I really enjoyed their emphasis on primary care, the closeness and proximity to my support systems, like my partner. Again, it wouldn't be that far of a drive. And I really enjoyed the facilities and being able to meet some of the students when I did a tour. Unfortunately, I couldn't go to their accepted student weekend, but really the determining factor between Case and Pitt and some of the other schools was going to be the financial aid package, so I could narrow it down to 3 and start comparing a little bit more apples to apples rather than apples to oranges. As I mentioned before, UCLA was just one of those schools that I always picture myself going to, and at the Accepted Student Weekend, I really enjoyed my time there. They had great students, a lot of emphasis on health equity and diversity, and I could really see myself creating a niche and a space there for myself. So I was really just eagerly awaiting a financial aid package to make that decision. My only hesitation in comparison to my other options, again, was financial aid, as well as the closeness to my support systems and my partner. And lastly, for Wake Forest, as I mentioned before, in November, they did give me a full ride merit scholarship. That mixed with a little bit of need-based aid would have given me a full ride to be able to afford living expenses, etc. And I really, really enjoyed my time at the Wake Forest Accepted Student Weekend. The students there were so sweet. They had really great initiatives. I could tell that the curriculum would also do me well there. And I really liked the Winston-Salem area a lot more than I thought I would when I ended up going. It was such a cute little town. So it really made my decision a hard one to narrow it down to 3 come April 15th. So I was just really eagerly awaiting financial aid offers to kind of narrow it down from there. Now, come April 15th, it was a real nail biter, y'all, okay? I was like so stressed. I started to grow a gray hair in my eyebrow. Don't look too hard at it because it's still there. But I was just, I literally felt like throwing up throughout this whole time because I didn't get my last financial aid package until basically April 15th, and I had to make my decision. And ultimately, I had to narrow it down to 3, the 3 being UCSF, Weill Cornell, and Washington University in St. Louis. It was really, really hard to have to let some of these other schools go, especially because not all of them gave me bad financial aid offers. But due to the strength of these 3 programs, as well as the offers that they gave me, it was very hard to turn down, considering the opportunity, the fit with my learning style, closeness to support systems in some cases, and just generally some of the research opportunities that I had learned about through their Accepted Student Weekends and talking to faculty. Now, as you can imagine, from April 15th to April 30th, I was going through it, okay? Obviously, with how great these 3 schools are, you really can't make a bad decision. I'm a firm believer in the fact that there is no right decision. You just have to make the decision the right one. And so I really took the time to think about what would help me and benefit me the most in my medical education, right? And that's going to look very different for everybody, whether it be if you want to be close to family or a partner, whether you need a certain amount of funds in order to strive in medical school, whether it be the certain, academic, research, clinical opportunities that are allotted to you, or whether you want to fulfill your passion for serving a certain population throughout your time there. I think that you can make any decision the right one. And to my surprise, come like mid to late April, I did receive a late interview and ultimate acceptance to the Washington University McDonald Scholars Academy Fellowship, which is a fellowship that would allow me to interact with students from various different graduate disciplines. I was chosen as one of 20 students to attend that academy, and it would allow me some amazing leadership skill training, as well as a full tuition scholarship and stipend for me to live off of. And ultimately, that mixed with how strong the Washington University program was, I decided ultimately that I was going to choose Washington University in St. Louis. And I was very, very happy with that decision, despite the amazing offers that I had received throughout the year. And I'm so happy to be saying that I will be a MESA Fellow and Washington University Phase 1 student this upcoming fall, not next year, this upcoming fall. Much like I said before, it was a whirlwind of a cycle. I got to learn so much about myself, and I really could not have done it without the wonderful support and mentorship of my past and current mentors, as well as the support and love of my friends, family, and partner. So I'll take this time in the video to give the most sincerest thanks to them to help me get to this point over the past 6 or 7 years. I know it was a little bit of a long and winding road, but we got here, and I'm so excited to embark on these next steps in my journey. Again, I really do want to use some of the wisdom I gained in this cycle to help other students achieve their dream of going to medical school and ultimately becoming amazing physicians. So I do have a Google form mentorship sign-up link in the link below. I don't know what my schedule is going to look like this upcoming medical school year. So if I do have to close the form, I apologize. It's just due to my bandwidth and being in medical school, but I'm going to try to help as many students as I can. And I really, really am excited for you and your journey as you embark on your medical school application process, whenever that may be. Regardless, I do plan to keep you guys posted with videos like this in terms of vlogging my experience throughout medical school and documenting that journey to savor it for better or for worse, and hopefully share some wisdom with y'all as you guys are embarking on your journey. But again, I really appreciate you guys tuning in, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Bye.